We're going to talk about some of the results that we've found in our green roof research. So just in case you're not familiar with green roofs, just real brief introduction. And then we'll talk about some of our runoff quantity and quality results, as well as some of our thermal results. Sarah Chelik is our thermal person. He's the mechanical engineer, but his son was born on Monday, so he decided to skip this and take care of his wife and his newborn son. So Bill will be covering his portion of the talk. And then just a real brief summary. This is the engineering building at SIUE right here. You can see in this section here is our experimental green roof. We're running trials, all sorts of trials with green roofs up there. And then we also have a field site, and in some of the pictures you'll see what our our ground level field site looks like. So in general, introduction, what are green roofs? Generally, you've got a roof that's partially or completely covered with vegetation. There may be an irrigation system, there may be a drainage layer, they're built up from the waterproofing membrane, just depends on your system. They're divided into two kind of classifications. One is if they are modular systems or built in place. You can see over here on the right, these are two different kinds of modular systems, and over here are a couple of built in place systems. Modular systems are individual units. They're typically planted off-site and then brought onto the roof, and you can have an instant green roof with them. Built in place, they're built up from the roof at the roof site, and so they're planted in place. So modular, one of their advantages is you can actually move them and get access to your roof if you need access to it, and then put them back and built in place. You've got to essentially dig it up to move it. The other classification is on how deep they are. Extensive green roofs are at least 12 inches deep, and intensive are less than that. I got that right? Yeah, okay. And they're typically like 2 to 6 inches. So if you have a deeper system, like these ones over here, you can have it more garden-like. You can get bigger plants and put them in place. They're higher maintenance. On the lower depth can be built in place, or the modular systems. Most of those are sedum species that are used in that. They're a lower maintenance system. But you can't do as much with them. So the other bit, why consider them? You're paying a premium if you put a green roof on a building. They cost, in the U.S., actually a significant amount more than a traditional roof. In Europe, it's not quite as much of a premium that you're paying. On a building owner's perspective, you can get, you're essentially getting an insulation layer, so there's some energy conservation. If you're building a new building, because of that, you can reduce the size of your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning equipment, so that can be an advantage as well. You also get some noise reduction benefits. The rest of the benefits are really more social benefits. You have reductions in stormwater runoff, and we'll go through some of our numbers, which are fairly typical of results that have been found on reducing that, the quantity of runoff that you get. So obviously that would help with flooding issues. In areas where you have combined sewer system, it helps with your combined sewer system, combined sewer overflows. They, on the energy side, also on temperature, there's the urban heat island effect, and they help attenuate that effect. There's advantages with putting green space back in. There are psychological and health benefits that have been shown from having any kind of green space, and if you can see the roof, a green roof, then it provides those similar kind of benefits. Biodiversity also, green space, you're getting some biodiversity back in there. So those are some of the primary benefits, but like I said, most of them are more of a social benefit than a building owner benefit. So Bill's going to talk some about what we found with our quantity and start a little bit with our quality.
All right, thank you. First thing I need to explain is I didn't know Susan at Clemson, and we just ended up working on green roofs together for whatever reason. As far as I know, they don't have a green roof at Clemson, even though we've both told them they need one. So our first study was actually not on the roof. What you see behind me is a field study with 32 different roof models in different constructs so that we can evaluate the thermal benefits and also the stormwater quantity and quality. So if we look at this first table right here, where our first 4 undergraduate and graduate students are working, each one of these represents an individual roofing system. And if we start over here on this side, here's our typical black rubber EPDM roofing membrane on top of a roofing deck. It's surrounded, ours are all 2 feet by 2 feet square with sheet metal sides. It's caulked up, and in the front there are rows of holes in a covered gutter system with a tube that leads to a gas can. And you can imagine Susan and I explaining to our chancellor, we have students that are handling gas cans on the roof and what we're doing with those. But it worked as a perfect system for us because every time it rained, all the water that flowed through either our control roof or our green roof constructs went into the gas can, and we can quantify exactly how much and what's in the water. So in this project, we have 2 blue modules here that have 8 inches of growing medium, one that's not planted and one that's planted with a sedum species. We have white here. Those are 6-inch depth growing medium. The kind of tan, which are hard to see here and here, are 4 inches. The copper are 2 inches of growth media. And then the silver tray here contains one of the modules, the modular system, with 4 inches of growth media. Now, the first thing you need to know about green roofs is it's not potting soil on the roof. These are engineered growth media. This particular mixture you're looking at here is what's called Arcolite. It's 80% clay. It's been heat fired to 1,000 degrees. The aggregate is about the size of marbles. It's just like you would go to Walmart and buy a bag of aggregate. We use lava, other things, and it's blended with an organic component. In this case, most everything we use is cheap, and it's got 20% composted pine bark in there. So 80% inorganic material rocks with 20% composted pine bark. The plants that are here are this particular variety is Sedum immigrash. They're a C3, C4 cam plant. They shift to do what they want. During drought, they act just like cactus. When there's no water available, they shut down and do all their gas exchange at night. That makes them perfect for the roof. In fact, in our project, this was established, you see, when we just started this in 2005. In 2007, we went through 63 days with no rain, and these plants in the 2-inch growth medium survived that drought with no additional water and very low nutrient inputs. So it's perfect for the rooftop. Okay? So in this project, we have 4 replicates. On one table, we don't have the non-planted, but we have 4 replicates of each depth with each growing media. And the objective here is to evaluate how much stormwater can a green roof retain. So here's our data from the first 18 months of the trial. This is from Krista Forrester's thesis, our first master's thesis from this work. The date here is between September of 05 to April of 07. It's as long as I could keep Krista weighing those gas cans. And believe me, we had rainfall in the morning and we'd weigh them because they fill up, and then you have to go back in the afternoon and weigh them. I think she weighed them 193 times in this period. So what we have here is the percent retention. We know the amount that fell on and then what flowed through. And then on the x-axis here, they're labeled 5 centimeter C is the control roof, and we'll come back to this one. And then this one is 2 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches, 8 inches, or 5, 10, 15, 20 centimeters of growth media, and the planted systems. And you can see over this period, we retained about 16% of the rain that fell on our control roof, that rubber black membrane roof, and between 45 and 52%, not significantly different between the different media depths in this project. So during the establishment period, when the plants have not covered the roof, we have stormwater retention that's about 3 to 4 times the amount that falls on, or that's retained on our regular roof. Now, most people don't know, but when you go to a hotel and look out, you see puddles on the roof, and there's always water in your gutter when you're working on it, right? So what we've done is calculated or shown by our study, and we've shown this now every year for 6 years, about 17% of the rain that falls on a roof stays up there and evaporates away. It doesn't go into stormwater. But in our first 18 months of our study, we got 40 or 50%, and as Susan said earlier, that's pretty average for studies that have been done in Europe, Canada, Mexico, internationally for a green roof system. Now, one thing, though, that we have that a lot of other places don't have is we have really dry summers. And an advantage of a time when we have what we would call a normal St. Louis summer, the last 2 years have been really wet. But in 2007, between April and November, we had pretty significant rain events, but long times between them. And in this year, we achieved 80% stormwater retention on top of our green roofs. Not only in this study, but in another study that we're looking at. That's an incredible amount of rainfall that we're retaining on an enormous amount of impervious surface in the city, if you start calculating it up. Here is, again, our still on even with the drying periods in between, we still get about 16% retention on the control roof system. And we found this in every test that we've done. Now, we've also looked at runoff water quality. We don't want to create an environmental disaster with an environmental solution. So Susan's going to talk to you in a moment about suspended solids and turbidity. We've actually taken apart or deconstructed the systems and looked at all sorts of heavy metal contaminants. We've ground up the growth media. We found high levels of lead in the pine bark, the one source we're using, and now we're using another source because we don't want to contaminate downstream. We found most of our contaminants running off roof coming from the control roof, and the example I have here is zinc, because it turns out that some of the spackle and sealing compounds they use on the roof are zinc-based. So then when we have rainfall, that breaks down and runs off. Whereas in our green roof systems, even though we still have the same spackle, we're getting some phytoremediation effect. These are just different growth media that we've tried. Arcilite, a glass-based. Hadeite is shale. Lava, like you would buy at Home Depot, the red rock, pumice, also bought at Home Depot, and the Rooflite, a commercial mix. So we get tremendous reductions in stormwater and not much heavy metal contamination that runs off roofs. So now back to you, Susan.
Okay. I've got a master's student who's working on suspended solids and turbidity. And this is why. You can see that this is some runoff from some of the different media. So there's some significant color to some of the media from the runoff. So we wanted to quantify and see what was happening with the solids. Turbidity, suspended solids obviously cause clarity problems in water, and solids themselves can, of course, grab onto nutrients and metals and things like that and carry them along. So on this analysis, we're using 4 growing media here. So similar ones that we've used in other results with the quantity analyses. This is actually some pictures of them. So we've got arcilite and expanded clay, bottom ash, which is from coal-fired power plants, widely available around, hadeite, the expanded shale, and then lava, which is a volcanic rock. And so arcilite and hadeite are commercially available, used in a lot of mixes. Lava is an alternative, and it's available in markets that arcilite and hadeite aren't as common in. And then, like I said, bottom ash is readily available. In this experiment, we're using 5 replicates of each of the media. We've got them planted with a mixed plug of 5 different sedum species. They were planted in October. And we've got them under some banks of light. That each bank has 4 bulbs in it. 2 are grow lights, 2 are regular fluorescent bulbs. a colleague came over and measured the light intensity, and the plants they're about 4 inches below those lights. They get about 10% of the full sun strength in the St. Louis region is what they're receiving. So they are growing. They started out an average diameter about 2.4 inches, and in February they are up to 2.8 inches. And that was part of the study, was looking at the vegetation in these pots over time, what kind of effect that would have as they're growing. So we've got the pots. They're 6-inch diameter pots, and it's 4 inches of media. Oops. All right. So I'm going to show some of the results that we've gotten to date. This is, we ran the study on the vegetated plots. I have some data showing the unvegetated pots. So these are all vegetated. It's the 4 different media shown here. This one is the mean total suspended solids concentration versus the trial number is the runoff time. So he waters the plants, collects the runoff, and then measures the total suspended solids and the turbidity. And they're watered about every 2 weeks, which is a standard for the sedum. That's adequate for them. So you can see here that we've got a couple of the media that are fairly similar down low, and a couple that are similar up high, and they start up higher and then they come down in general for them. So lava and haydite are significantly different than the total suspended solids from in the runoff are significantly different than the arcillite and the bottom ash runoff. This was run using an ANOVA with the Tukey's test. So the letters are showing if there's similar, statistically different letters, there's difference. So these numbers here, the 20 and the 120, wastewater treatment plant effluent is typically on the order of like 10 to 30 milligrams per liter is the effluent. So that's kind of down here around this 20, plus some of the data that's been published in studies on roof runoff, general roof runoff, got some from China and France, are in the range of 30 to 120 is what that data was. So that's showing these are non-green roofs on the runoff. And so you see the green roofs after this, the arcillite and the haydite, after that first bit, then they're all coming down. They're similar to a regular roof runoff in terms of total suspended solids. Same kind of data, but now we've got turbidity, mean turbidity versus the trial number. And again, just showing you have a similar pattern on that, similar kind of results. The 280 on that is the EPA in, I believe it was late November, came out with new regulation on construction site runoff, and particular sizes of construction sites now have a 280 NTU turbidity limit, water quality limit for their runoff. So you see that all the media are quite a bit below that. Now, these are the unvegetated or non-vegetated pots, and this is staying with turbidity, so it's mean turbidity here, versus the trial number. In this, we had to restart this study, so at the point we put these graphs together, you only had 5 trials instead of the 9 trials with the vegetated. But you see with the non-vegetated, you can start out with some very high turbidity, but it quickly drops off and is kind of leveling off. But still, lava and haydite are significantly, statistically significantly higher than arcillite and bottom ash. Now, this is looking at, I've got a couple slides here with the effect of the vegetation, because we wanted to look at what effect the vegetation would have on the suspended solids and the turbidity. This is still, again, the turbidity versus a trial number, and we just have 5 data points because of the non-vegetation. We only have 5 trials. And you see here with the haydite, we start out the non-vegetated very high and it drops. And the vegetated, we start out much lower and then it continues to drop. But the only statistically different point is that first. So in the first flush, the vegetation is providing a lot of advantage in reducing the turbidity and the runoff. And I should mention that we planted plugs. I don't think I mentioned that. We haven't done it with cuttings. These were plugs that were planted. And this is with bottom ash, and then this showing just the mean total suspended solids, that we got similar results with suspended solids and turbidity. And we had similar results across all four media in suspended solids and turbidity, that the first flush, there was a significant effect, and thereafter there wasn't any statistically significant effect. The little stars that Eason put here were, this is significantly different on a one-tailed t-test. The rest of it's all two-tailed t-test. Yes?
And have you started to hypothesize why there is this initial flush and then it declines so precipitously on all of these examples?
Well, the media, most of the suspended solids and turbidity, I think it's the dust from the media. It's very dusty when it starts. So you get that initial cleaning of the media. Plus, we're getting some of the composted pine bark. I should have mentioned this is the same formulation. It's 80% by volume media, growth media, 20% by volume composted pine bark. So we are getting some of that composted pine bark through as well on it.
Wash this first and then...
Correct. This is all just as they do. It's not washed currently in the field, so we just took fresh media and put it in there. So you're essentially getting a first flush cleaning effect of it. But the vegetation is providing some advantage there in holding, apparently, plugging up some of those pore spaces. There are a couple of the media, the bottom ash and I forget which other one, they have this bump up. On the second one, they go down. It's not statistically different, but they do have that little bit of bump up, so that something may be going on there, but we haven't investigated it. All right, so back to Bill with the thermal results.
This is the part where you're supposed to pretend I'm short and I have a heavy Turkish accent, because the mechanical engineer is short and has a heavy Turkish accent. As Susan pointed out at the beginning of the presentations, many communities have issues with stormwater. They're interested in aesthetics, green space, biodiversity, all of those things. But we're convinced, and the folks that work with us are, we're going to sell green roofs on energy benefits. The Ford plant in Dearborn, Michigan, which is the largest green roof in North America, it's where they used to make the old Model Ts. It's the very first assembly line in the United States. In 2000 was completely cleaned up, and they put a 10.4 acre green roof on top of that facility. It's the largest one in North America. After they put the green roof on the building, they saved in the next 3 years 5% on their energy costs inside that building. Now what we don't know is it's not replicated, so it could have been climate and other factors. But we did some back of the envelope calculations on how big the building was. We know how much it costs for a green roof. They paid for that green roof in 2.5 years, just in their energy savings inside. The American Society of Landscape Architects also is moving into the green era, built a brand new facility in Washington, D.C., put a green roof on top, and last year they saved 12% on their energy cost inside that building in the green roof area compared to some of the other areas. Now that's a significant energy saving. So what we're all chasing is, what kind of a thermal reduction do we get from the green roof? We can tell you on our engineering building that on that roof deck in the summertime, that black roof membrane, the EPDM membrane, sometimes is as hot as 140 to 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Underneath our green roof models, we don't completely cover the roof, it's only 85 at the same time. That's a tremendous thermal heat load difference underneath. So what we're chasing now is we have data under all of these different systems, and we actually have somebody that knows what to do with it, the little short Turkish gentleman, we're trying to calculate what's an R value for a green roof, and what's the thermal conductance, and what sort of energy savings can we garner from that. So what CERTR is doing is taking our data, and we're looking at this as a process. Here's our aggregate growth media here with a plant canopy, and what we want to know is what's the heat flux through this, and what sort of environmental benefits do we get. So without going into the mathematics of all of this, we're looking at three parts really: the radiation, the convection, and the conduction of the system. Same thing we would do for any sort of heat loading system. Oops. And what we can do is break this down into two equations to actually calculate the heat flux. And if we assume that it's a green roof that covers the whole roof and we get no heat loss, adiabatic heat loss through the sidewalls, what we're looking at is one directional heat transfer, just like through insulation in the house. And then we can rearrange this equation to actually calculate an R value or a heat flux. Now we haven't done that yet, but we're getting closer. Now, what we're looking at in this initial study is 3 different sedum species, and these are really good examples of what the foliage looks like on these. They're little succulent plants. This one here, Sedum sexangulaire, if you just touch it and break it off, it'll actually root in and cover up the roof. Sedum spurium has a little bit more elegant foliage, and then Sedum kamchaticum, much bigger. But they're all between 2 and 6 inches tall, very low, dense, tight canopy. So they provide shading to the roof below, and also when they're adequately watered, or when the roof is saturated and they're transpiring water, there's radiative and evapotransitive cooling that's occurring. And what we want to know is how much of that is occurring. We also have the different media, and I put this in not knowing that Susan was going to have the other ones in there, but here's that white pumice. It's quite reflective, right? It's like the white membrane roof on our black surface. The lava here is red. The hadeite is really dark, and in fact, even fully planted, this is our worst thermal performer compared to our best one here is the pumice, and then the orange of the clay. So even the media gives you some thermal benefit. Now what CERTR has done is integrated our data across several months, and what I'm going to talk about today is just for the month of August in 2007. The first letter here is the media, so archilite, pumice, lava, and then the second is the species Kamchaticum, A for sexangulaire, and S for spurium. And you can see that the temperature under these green roof models goes up and down over the daytime. Now what he's not showing you here is that the temperature of the roof is going up and down at about this flux, because it takes a really hot heat load in the daytime and then cools off very rapidly at night. The green roof systems, it dampens that heat loading effect, and what we're looking at here is a lot less of a heat load effect that's occurring on top of the roof. Now he's actually calculated the temperature at peak hours on one day in August, and here you can see that the different green roof systems give us as much as a 6-degree temperature difference in the heat load on the roof deck below. So the system here with the circles, which is the lava with the sedum spurium in it, has a better, lower heat load on the surface of the roof than the one with the green triangles, which is the lava with the sexangulaire species. So not only can we identify whether a green roof provides benefits, but also the components. We can look at the heat flux over a daytime period. Again, each one of these individually. And of course, there's actually heat loss in the morning, and then a tremendous heat gain in the daytime on top of our building. And we can actually calculate an hourly energy cost. Here we're assuming a 50,000 square foot green roof, like on a Walmart or a Home Depot store or a warehouse, with an 8 cent per kilowatt hour charge, which is pretty standard for the Midwest. And you can see here there are even differences in the energy cost in a building depending on what aggregate and what plant species. This is the worst one here during this period of the day. Early on, it gets better later in the day, and they fluctuate over time. And again, our goal here is to actually calculate what the energy cost of the building is. Now, Susan and I have tried 4 times to convince our power company, Ameren, and Illinois Power, and the US EPA to help us build some scale model buildings with white roofs, black roofs, and green roofs on them, each individually heated and cooled, so we can actually get real numbers so that people know what's going on. These are real numbers. I don't want you to think they're not. But we'd like to actually have that data. Pardon me? They're very interested in it. They entertain us every time we go, but nobody's ever given us any money to do the project yet. But we're persistent. We're going to get there. We thought we had it all worked out. We partnered with Ameren in Missouri on a bottom ash project in the University of Texas and the University of Hawaii for $875,000. And then the fly ash pond at the Tennessee River plant let go, and now there's no more funding for working with coal products because they're going to be listed as a contaminant. Now, we're working with the bottom ash, which is completely different, but that's the climate we live in. Now, again, our goal is to get that energy cost because we think that's what's going to move this forward. There's a lot of people that put a green roof on. It's a garden. It works for them. There's homeowners that are interested in it, but the energy savings is going to be a really big driver. Now, we have not worked with carbon capture, but my friend at Michigan State, Brad Rowe, and his PhD student, Kristen Getter, have just published a paper on how much carbon these little sedums plant take up. And it's a lot. It's not the same as planting a forest, but there are certainly environmental benefits from having a planted system on top of that roof. The embodied energy in the aggregate that's up there is also lots of carbon capture in that. If you ignore how much carbon it costs to make some of these heat-fired aggregates, that stuff is pretty stable up there. We know of green roofs in Germany that have been there 100 years, and they haven't replaced the roof underneath nor the aggregate. So it's basically locked up carbon that's in that system. Okay? So we've got some summary slides, and then we'd be happy to take questions. A little bit about our group. Susan and I we named ourselves the co-directors. When you start something, you get to do that. And that. We now have 5 faculty at SIUE, 1 at Carbondale. We have a big collaborator at University of Texas that's coming in on Sunday. We're working with the University of Hawaii. We've put 80-plus students through our program now. We have 7 industry collaborators that are interested in our project. We're going to show you here at the end in a moment, we're actually doing wind tunnel testing for green roofs because we're interested in developing these products and getting them into the marketplace. Now, in terms of our runoff quantity data, green roof systems, hands down, reduce stormwater runoff in the Midwest. Chicago is one of the biggest green roof cities in the United States right now. In 2007, 500,000 square feet were added in Chicago of green roof space. You can actually get a $250,000 research grant from the Environmental Division in Chicago to put a green roof up if you can justify it. They have $55,000 grants they give out. They also fast track your building permit, which is enormous in terms of cost savings if you have green features, including a green roof. When saturated, we have had in this wind tunnel a number of green roof models, fully vegetated, that have sustained for a 5-minute period 140 miles an hour. That means that green roofs meet building code in Dade County, Florida, and Miami, because that's what their standard is. And of course, in the Midwest, it's not an issue like it is in the coastal areas. So we're working on this. The other work that we're doing that we don't have anything up here yet is on fire on green roofs. It's funny how we get involved in some of these. I was at a meeting in Texas for something else, not green roofs. And the dean of the business school at Ithaca College sat down next to me, and we started talking. And she said, "I'm getting a new building," and I asked her about it. She says, "It's going to be green." So I said, well, without telling her what I did, what are you going to get? What kind of green features? Oh, we're getting a green roof. So I said, well, I work on those. So we started talking about it. I told her a little bit about it and everything. The next year in Ithaca, they had a fireworks display, and it was windy, and the embers fell on the green roof and flash burned the roof off, the vegetation, but didn't burn her building, and the fire marshal was quoted in the paper saying the green roof saved the building, because if it had landed on the regular membrane, it would have burned at least part of the building. So basically what they had was like a prairie fire on top of the roof, and it saved the building. So that was our first piece of evidence, and then Susan and I, we get to know some really strange characters. We have a physicist that lives in a berm home, which is the old style green roof from the 70s. And he was out playing with, he works with lasers, but he was out playing with matches on his property one day last year. And the fire got away from him and burned his green roof off. And the fire marshal, after his wife hit him a couple of times, told her that if he hadn't had the green roof, he'd have burned your house down. So we know that the green roofs actually will withstand fire. There's the aggregate that doesn't burn. It's 80% inorganic. So if there's dry vegetation, it burns off. So we're getting ready to set up the NC testing table and do some actual fire testing on green roofs. So I'm not sure when we explain that we've got gas cans, matches, and green roofs. Anyway, we've had a lot of fun doing this today, but we also have a lot of fun doing what we do. And we'd be more than happy to answer questions. Anything we have here, just so you know, because we're state, if you go to www.siue-green.com, all of our research papers, in fact, the wind tunnel report was put up Monday. It's 48 pages, good bedtime reading. But it's up there, and you're more than welcome to take a look at it, call with questions, email, we'll take it on. Okay, go ahead.
I've actually got two questions. Number one, have there been any studies comparing the benefits of a green roof as opposed to an active energy collection system like solar panels?
Funny you asked that. The National Roofing Contractors Association supported our wind tunnel research because they're involved. They have an enormous base of roofing contractors that do work. And they think that the thin film solar panels are going to be the next thing for homeowners. So while Mark Graham was working with us, Sutter has a little solar panel in his lab. And Mark says, who works on those? And we said, we do. And the next thing we know, thin film panels are showing up, and now they're on top of the engineering building. And we're looking at their collection. We're interested in whether they can be placed on roofs with green roofs. We already know from some of our other data, not related to solar, we can grow green roofs fully in the shade. So if we had solar panels that were mounted up there, we could even have the green roof underneath them as long as they got some water. We're going to have to irrigate, but we have plants that will survive low light. So we can combine the systems, and we don't have an answer yet, but we're heading down that road.
And just a quick one, and then I'll get out of the way. Just to verify that you got no metals leaching out of the bottom ash?
That's right. Absolutely. We actually did digestion of the bottom ash and did, not on the roof, but in the lab. We did total extractable and plant extractable, and the plant extractable was insignificant with the plants that we used compared to what was actually in there, because it is got heavy metals in it. But we've had it in the field for 2 years, and we've measured the water quality with no
bottom ash were not for regulatory exclusion. Would fail in the hazardous waste.
Probably.
Yeah.
No, that's what they're debating right now. So it's not on our new student success center, but it's in our research project. And the reason we're doing that is because the aggregates are expensive. That's the most expensive part. The plants, most people have those, but shipping the aggregate around makes it really expensive. Every state has a coal power plant in it or right next to it, and it's a big waste product. So we're investing. We're just trying everything. Okay, repeat the question. So please.
Surely your friends at the NRCA are interested in knowing, when we put a vegetative roof on, how does that affect the lifetime of the roof underneath? One of the things that really destroys roofing systems is the ultraviolet attack from the sun. The sun is radioactive. Can we get our payback just there?
We think so. Our collaborator, Kelly Luckett of Green Roof Blocks, has amortized the cost out. And a normal roof replacement is approximately 20 years. We know of green roofs in Germany that have been there 100 years and they've not replaced the roofing material underneath.
Surely
Now,
that's
we're
not
not-
EPDM or...
No, it's probably not, and we're not saying that, but we know of long lasting. What we do know is the roof on the engineering building has failed 3 times, but not under the green roof because the EPDM membrane has bubbled up, and with the UV light and the freeze thaw, it's cracked at every one of those bubbles. But the same bubbles are underneath our roof, and they've been under there for 7 years and no issue. So you're right. The freeze thaw cycle is depressed because we've moderated the temperature of the roof deck incredibly, and there's no ultraviolet light now striking that product underneath. So I don't have an answer for you, but most people say it's 2 to 3 times, so 20 to 60 years, and then if you amortize the cost out, it's reasonable.
Well, all the flashings around the parapet walls are probably still going to be exposed. Is there an assembly
Yes.
we can cover those with?
Well, it's interesting you asked that at a place called Wind Engineering, which is a small consulting engineering firm in St. Louis. The gentleman we work with, Kelly Luckett of Green Roof Blocks and Vic Yost of Yost Greenhouses, actually developed an H-style planter box that went on top of the plantings, and they planted it because the owner wanted a green roof that cascaded down over the walls. They put an ivy in that box, and now it's cascading out over the top of the flashings and down the siding and covering all that up. We don't know what kind of benefit we get. Please, and then
With respect to the energy efficiency benefits, it seems that mostly they're associated with cooling benefits in the summer.
in the wintertime, these things freeze up like a block of ice, and the R value goes way down. The temperature benefit is only 1 or 2 degrees because they don't have a big heat load on top of them as much. So yeah, it's just mostly in the summertime.
Well, then the Ford plant example that you gave with the 5% energy reduction, I can almost guarantee you that plant's not air conditioned.
Yeah.
So the cooling benefits.
There's some cooling in there, but not all of it. You're right. Not in the whole assembly line, but some parts of it.
I'm sure the offices are air conditioned, but in
But
the
it
vast
is-
majority of it.
but at ASLA,
So I don't know where the
12%
5% is coming from in that scenario. But I know that there were other energy efficiency measures in that plant. They set it up to have natural daylighting and stuff like that.
Absolutely, they have.
And I don't know how they've separated that out.
They haven't because it's not replicated. They just have saved 5%.
Yeah, but do you know where the 5% comes from?
Don't.
It's a mix of maybe.
It's a mix of whatever
other
features they
measures.
put in it.
Yeah.
That's why we want our.
That's why we want our money. Because we're going to insulate them at 10, 20, and 30 R value and different rooftops and all of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it doesn't make sense to attribute all 5% savings to the green roof.
I
when they do
understand
these
that.
other measures.
That's right. Same thing in the ASLA headquarters, the 12%, because they've done other things also.
Yeah, where did they get that big differential?
The big differential, not sure. They're actually, though, they're heating and cooling the building because they have people that work in there that like office space. I mean,
So you mentioned freeze thaw, that it moderates or, but I'm wondering in winter, like you said just a few minutes ago, sedum dies down.
No, actually, the sedums that we're showing here, in fact, every one of the ones that I had up here, the spurium, Kamchaticum is a dormant species, it's brown, but spurium and sexangulaire have winter interest. They're green, and if the conditions are right, they'll be happily growing in the wintertime.
Something's wrong with my sedum. It doesn't seem to be green here.
What is it? Which, do you know what species?
I think it is the sexagonal.
Huh, I don't know, ours stays nice and green during the wintertime.
Is it because you're further south than us, or is it true even in Chicago, like these species?
Well, if they're covered up with snow, then they go brown because they don't get the light they need.
And you don't get snow down?
We do get some, but not that much. Please.
As Susan mentioned, it was less expensive to build green roofs in Europe than in the United States. Is that because of subsidies or why? What's the reason?
I'm not sure. The question is it, it's less expensive to build green roofs in Europe, and why is that? And
I know.
Oh,
Okay.
no, no, here we go.
It's the material cost and their climate. They have a maritime climate that stays pretty damp, so they don't have to have 4, 8, 10 inches of growth media. They have, some of their cases, they have a sedum mat, which is like a moss mat, that's in a netting that's about a ½ inch thick and about a ½ inch of aggregate. And they're getting their aggregate because the building next door that they're refurbishing, they smash up the bricks and put them on the roof and put the plant materials up there. So it's all about material handling cost and their climate, which reduces the depth of the medium compared to what we face here in the U.S.
So in Seattle or something like that?
Seattle can have much reduced cost because they have the similar maritime type climate. Yes, ma'am.
Well, but to add to that, and this is where I'd like to go, the relationship with policy in Germany is mandated that all flat roofs are green roofs.
And 17%
So,
roof surface area.
so it's a different,
green roof.
it's a already set in mechanism that it's a mindset of how they're doing it, which aids that reduction of costs. But where I'd like to go with this is you're working with people at the University of Texas, and every time I fly into Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, there's seas of flat roofs.
Yeah.
As your friend comes in Sunday, is there not room
He's
for
going to see the same
negotiating
thing
with some of those?
He's going to see the same thing. You know, it's different. Every community is different. Portland has a green roof policy. They give you 2 additional square feet of retail space for every square foot of green space that you have, including your green roof. And the reason they do that is they have anadromous fish. And for those of you that don't know, an anadromous fish means you live in the ocean part of your life, and in the rivers the other part. And most of those are endangered now because we've overpopulated and there's contaminants in the water and everything. So when the water strikes that hot roof surface, the temperature raises in the river and the anadromous fish can't survive. So they have to do something to do that, and they're looking at this roof space as one mechanism for doing that. And, you know, the old way of doing it was to catch all the water, but they're running out of space for catchment basins and everything. So now we're catching it on the roof, and we're getting the other benefits. In another community, like Chicago, there it's all about thermal. The mayor in Chicago has been told that if he greens 65% of the downtown area, he'll lower the air temperature in the city by 10 to 12 degrees in the summertime. And in 1993, 700 people died in the heat wave in Chicago. So his whole impetus is to green the space down there, not just at the street level and that, but at the top, and they actually give grants for that. In Washington, D.C., and in Maryland, in the Chesapeake Bay system, it's all about managing contaminants. And Maryland just passed in January, don't quote me on the date, a mandate that allows green roofs to be a best management practice for stormwater quality. So their incentive is to improve the stormwater quality of the roof runoff. So every community is different. We don't have a standard, whereas in Europe, it's fairly tight ecoclimate. It's almost all the same, very dense, highly populated areas. They lack green space. We've seen green roofs with soccer goals on top of the parking garage, right? So it's a green roof that's doing the other things, but it's also serving as green space. So everybody's different. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the climates. You mentioned that you are working with different schools in the United States. Have you looked at the benefits for different climates?
Absolutely. We're working very closely with Mark Simmons, is my ecologist friend at Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center at University of Texas. Subtropical climate. They get 12 to 14 inches of rain per year on a typical year in about 3 months, and then the rest of the year it's bone dry. So they face a little different issue than we do. They have to actually give a little bit of supplemental water. But they can do that because they're getting good thermal benefits. It's really warm. And they're in Austin, Texas especially, the city is on top of the aquifer. So any contaminants they can keep out of the aquifer that they're using for drinking water and potable water is really important. And the city is very aggressive. In Hawaii, it's a little bit different. The group we're working with out there, and we've just established a collaboration, and we're lobbying hard for a trip to go to. There, it's all about managing rainfall and that because they have enormous rains. And they get mudslide runoffs, much like they do in developed areas in California and that, when there's fires and that. So there they want as much media as they can possibly get on the roof and plants that get rid of the water as fast as they can. Where in St. Louis and in Illinois, we kind of both. We have high volume rainfalls, but we have also long periods between. So we're trying to maximize those sorts of things. It's interesting, in Hawaii, they're mostly using tropical plants. In Austin, the plants they're using are very similar to ours. The sedums, they have a little better luck than we do with native plants. The problem we have with natives is that we do have these long dry periods and we don't water. In Texas, where they're working, they're given supplemental water. Now, they're not taking the water out of the ground. They're using condensate from air conditioning units or gray water from the buildings. So they're recycling the water to do it. Did I miss somebody over here before I go back? Okay.
Well, in construction, we really try to minimize our materials and everything, so there's not a lot of carrying capacity up on the roof. How much do these things weigh, and how many roofs are actually candidates for this?
Under normal building codes in Illinois and Missouri, you have a dead load allowance that approaches about, depends on where you are, it's approximately 20 pounds per square foot. The gentleman that started Green Roof Blocks was a roofer by trade. His system is designed maximum saturation, 4 inches of growth media, full plant coverage to be 17 pounds per square foot. So he's under the allowance for dead load weight. Now when they're bone dry and it's not rained in weeks and the plants are there and that, they only weigh about 10 pounds. So they fluctuate based on the water volume.
But we still expect to get a snow load on this.
Snow load is live load.
It's a live load.
Calculated differently. So these meet the dead load constraints. Now, on an older building, we tell everybody we know you're going to need an engineering structural analysis because under old building codes, we're not sure exactly what the dead load is. And you might have the architectural drawings, but if you don't, you have to have somebody that can do it. Let me just go back. I'm not running out of everybody's time.
Yes, anyone who needs to leave, certainly you can do that. We'll continue with just a couple more questions.
Sure.
Then,
I've lost my pointer, but this green roof over here on the left, I don't know if you recognize that, but that's the City Hall in Chicago. And the mayor decided if he wanted to put green roofs up, he wanted to have a green roof. And what they've done here, you notice there's trees here. What they did is over the girder beams in the building, they put 36-inch planter boxes in the green roof. So they've got, kind of like a garden roof up there. This is also in Chicago. This is McCormick Place. It's a 2.5-acre green roof that's just been planted in the modular system. And here, there were weight load allowances, but they didn't want to have it. What they just want is an extensive green roof. This green roof, you can't see it, but about 3 blocks up is the Empire State Building. If you get National Geographic in the June 2008 issue, there's a picture of this building. I was on this roof, and we were trying to figure out how to stand over here and get the Empire State Building, and we couldn't figure it out. The National Geographic guy came up, looked at the reflection in the window, and snapped the picture, and you can see the Empire State Building in the window. We're not smart enough to figure that out. But a good point about this one is it's a modular system, and the roofing membrane under it was not good. In fact, our collaborator in St. Louis said, I wouldn't put the green roof, but the architects that have the offices in here planted this, put it up, wanted to have it out there. The roof failed. So last year, they lifted every one of these off here, replaced the roof, and put it back, and now we have the green roof right back up there again. It's worked out perfectly. Yes, sir?
Couple of questions. How scalable are your wind tunnel data or experiments to the real systems?
The next thing we're looking at University of Florida Atlantic, they have a wind wall with large fans on a wall about this size. We're going to have a larger size model and look at that sort of thing. All we were trying to do was demonstrate at what wind speed some of the aggregate lifted off and that. So,
another follow-up question, following up with Tim's question. if you want to take advantage of this system during the winter months as well as summer, could you combine this with like a greenhouse effect?
You mean a glass house on top?
Right.
It's possible, but then you're heating and cooling inside the glass house too, so there's trade-offs. I don't know. We haven't thought about that. Yes, ma'am.
Al, you mentioned that you were looking at calculations to counter, expense of doing this. In reference to his question, are you going to start including in those calculations what the extra cost of the building?
I'll tell you exactly what the extra cost is if you want to know. I don't have to go back.
Oh.
A green roof on top of a building, depending on the system that you buy, is going to add $11 to $45 or more per square foot to place the green roof on the building. Not in the cost of, if you're building modern construction, the building itself is just the actual parts of the green roof that go up there. So the aggregate, the plants, and if it's in a modular system, or if it's built in place with a drainage layer, that's what adds to the cost. So then the problem is when you build new construction and you run out of money, what's the last thing you put up? The green roof. So then it gets left off until you find some funding.
So, but have you added in the cost of how much more reinforcement has to be put into the roof?
No reinforcement necessary. If it's modern construction and you're meeting building codes and the green roof meets that, you don't have to put any additional support underneath. It's only in old buildings, refits, that you have to worry about that. Or if you go much deeper.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please.
At this time, are there any federal grants or subsidies for municipalities for green roofs?
In Chicago, the leader. This last year, there was one $250,000 grant, three $50,000, and I think 32 $5,000 grants awarded for.
That's just for Chicago.
That's just for Chicago.
Is there anything federal for?
Not that we know of.
But the State of Illinois Treasurer's Office has...
What's that, Francis?
State of Illinois Treasurer's Office has got, it's not technically a grant, it's a low interest loan to help.
For green infrastructure. And white roofing and those.
Right.
Put it on